Welcome, curious minds, to AI History of Western Philosophy.
Great to be delving into another fascinating topic.
Today, we're embarking on a truly, a really fascinating journey, I think, spanning millennia, actually.
Yeah, connecting ancient interpretive practices with really modern theoretical insights. It's quite the leap.
It is. But before we dive into the depths of allegorical and dialectical exegesis, just a quick but important note for you.
Right.
AI-generated content, specifically this podcast, well, it confabulates. It can present ideas as fact. And though our subject is philosophy, we are not philosophers.
Definitely not. We're exploring with it.
Exactly. AI History of Western Philosophy's mission, beyond pointing you to the original sources, is to experiment with philosophy as material, and generate new possibilities for thought.
A philosophical sandbox, in a way.
Precisely. So with that in mind, let's explore how two seemingly disparate thinkers, separated by vast stretches of time, employ strikingly similar methods to grapple with the very nature of truth and reality.
It truly is a profound comparison. Today, we're going to look at the Derveni Papyrus.
The oldest surviving book in Europe, right? Incredible.
Incredible, yeah. And also just a radical ancient philosophical text in its own right. Then we'll jump way forward, to the work of the contemporary philosopher Slavoj Žižek.
Okay.
Our mission, as always, is to extract the most important nuggets from this rich material, helping you understand not just what these thinkers did,
but why their methods and conclusions still matter, even today, why we should care.
Exactly. Why it resonates now.
All right, let's begin by unwrapping this incredible historical document, the Derveni Papyrus, dating back to the late 4th century BCE. I mean, just think about that.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
And it's not just an old scroll found in a tomb. It's like a living testament to a radical intellectual act.
So can you tell us about its core project? What was this anonymous author actually trying to do?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is how the Derveni author, and we don't even know their name, which adds to the mystery, takes this culturally sacred text.
An Orphic theogonical poem, so myths about the gods and creation.
Exactly. Stories deeply embedded in their culture. And he systematically reinterprets it, but through the lens of late Presocratic natural philosophy.
Okay, so these are the early Greek thinkers trying to explain the world using natural principles, not gods, like Thales and Anaximander.
Precisely those guys, or their intellectual descendants anyway. Thinkers looking for underlying natural causes, forces, elements. So the Derveni author is essentially doing ancient source remixing.
Ah, I like that. Source remix.
Yeah. He's aiming to extract a hidden, rational truth from what, on the surface just look like divine chaos, wild stories about God.
So trying to find order in the myth.
Right. And this wasn't just some academic game. It sets a crucial precedent for understanding how we approach interpretation even now. It shows us how these ancient minds were already grappling with that gap between, let's say, mythos and logos, between story and reason. Hashtag 1.1, the potent world of ancient Greek mythos.
Okay, to really get a handle on the Derveni author's ambition, maybe we need to understand just how powerful myth was back in 5th century BCE Greece. It wasn't just entertainment, was it? Like campfire stories.
Oh, absolutely not. Not even close. In that era, myth was, it was the foundational discourse for Greek society.
Foundational how?
I mean, it wasn't just storytelling. It actively structured pretty much every aspect of life. Myth provided the bedrock for religion, obviously explaining the gods, rituals, sacrifices.
Makes sense.
It was also key to education, transmitting moral values, cultural history, who we are. And it even underpinned political legitimacy.
Really? Politics?
Yes, city-states would often claim mythical ancestors to establish kinship or alliances with other cities. Its authority was so potent, it was used in actual diplomacy.
Wow. Okay.
So you see, reinterpreting myth wasn't just an abstract thought experiment. It was a high-stakes intellectual endeavor. It had real-world implications.
Because you're messing with the foundations.
You're messing with the foundations.
Yeah.
And the Orphic tradition, specifically, with its complex stories about divine births, cosmic origins, the soul, the afterlife. It was already seen as this kind of deep well of profound hidden wisdom.
So a prime target for someone wanting to reinterpret.
Exactly. It made its text a perfect candidate for an allegorical interpretation, one that promised to reveal truths not immediately accessible to just anyone. Like these myths already held deeper meanings, just waiting for the right person, the right key to unlock them.
Yeah.
Hashtag 1.2, a culture war of ideas.
Okay, here's where it gets really dynamic, I think. The 5th century BCE wasn't just like everyone believing the same myths in the same way, right? It was apparently a time of intense intellectual ferment. Some even call it a culture war between science and religion.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, this era saw the rapid rise of that Presocratic natural philosophy we mentioned, these early materialist, rationalist thinkers, and also the sophistic movement.
The sophists, right? Teachers of rhetoric, famous for questioning traditional beliefs.
Exactly. Guys like Protagoras, Gorgias. They emphasize human reason, rhetoric, and often challenge traditional norms and beliefs head-on. So this created what scholars call an agonistic field.
Like an intellectual battleground.
Pretty much, yeah. Different explanations for the world were fiercely vying for authority. Traditional polytheism, Zeus, Hera, all the Olympian gods, it faced serious challenges from emerging monotheistic or pantheistic ideas seeking more unified, maybe more rational explanations.
So the Derveni author wasn't working in a vacuum. His allegorical method wasn't totally unique?
Not unique, no. It was part of a broader trend, sometimes called the sophistic enlightenment, this move to rationalize traditional beliefs, to make them compatible with new ways of thinking. His treatise wasn't some neutral academic text. It was a very deliberate polemical intervention.
Polemical how? Who is he arguing against?
Well, he explicitly criticizes traditional priests, for example, for their literalism. He basically says they perform the rites but don't understand the deeper meaning. Yeah. And he also takes on rival sophists who might offer different, maybe less philosophically rigorous interpretations. So by using Orpheus, by interpreting this hugely authoritative figure.
He wasn't just borrowing the name.
No, he wasn't just borrowing his gravitas. He was attempting to capture that authority for his own specific philosophical school. He was asserting its superior explanatory power in this really contested intellectual arena.
He's saying my interpretation of Orpheus is the real one, the one that makes sense now.
That's essentially the move, yeah.
Yeah.
This ancient wisdom actually supports my modern philosophy.
Okay, so amidst all this intellectual combat, what kind of philosophical system actually emerges from this radical reinterpretation? What's the Derveni author's vision of the universe once he's done his remixing?
Right, what's the payoff? Well, the author constructs this really quite eclectic and I think original theologized conception of nature.
Theologized nature, meaning?
Meaning he's trying to explain nature, the cosmos,
Yep.
but using theological or divine concepts, just reinterpreted through physics. His core aim is to replace those chaotic, often anthropomorphic, sometimes frankly scandalous stories about the gods.
Like gods behaving badly.
Exactly. Replace all that with a rational, unified explanation for the universe's origin and function, all grounded in natural philosophy. He wants order from the divine chaos.
And what does that order look like?
Well, at its heart is a single, all-intelligent divine principle. He calls it mind. That's nous in Greek.
Nous, okay. A key concept in Greek
It's
philosophy.
a huge concept. And he identifies this mind with air, and ultimately with the supreme god, Zeus, Theos.
Wait, so mind, air, and Zeus, they're all the same thing for him?
Pretty much, yeah. Different names or aspects of one single dominant organizing force that pervades and governs everything in the cosmos. This mind, air, Zeus is the ultimate reality.
Wow, that's a big philosophical move, merging the chief god with air and pure intelligence.
It's a remarkably early attempt at a kind of grand unified theory, you could say, trying to reduce all the messy details of myth into one rational, pervasive intelligence that orders everything.
And where did he get these ideas? Was he just making it up?
No, he was drawing from the intellectual currents of his time, the concept of nous, or air, as the intelligent motive cause. That's a direct borrowing from Ionian philosophers like Anaxagoras and Diogenes of Apollonia.
Right. They were big on air or mind as the primary substance or force.
Exactly. He also incorporates a kind of corpuscular theory, basically, an early form of atomism, though maybe not as developed as someone like Democritus later. He posits reality is made of initially mixed fine particles, leptomeres.
So tiny bits of matter.
Tiny bits of matter interacting. And from Heraclitus, the everything flows guy, famous for his cryptic sayings.
And fire as a key element.
Right. From Heraclitus, he borrows a conception of cosmic justice. He actually upgrades the Erinyes, the Furies, who usually avenge specific crimes like murder.
Right. Terrifying figures.
Yeah, he turns them into cosmic forces, ensuring universal order, not just social order. And he also shares Heraclitus's rather elitist view that his teachings are only for a select few, the pure in hearing, not for the unwashed masses.
Okay, so it's a synthesis, pulling threads from different...
A sophisticated synthesis, yeah. And the outcome is this kind of pantheistic and materialist monism.
Okay, break that down. Pantheistic materialist monism.
Right. Pantheistic because the divine minder Zeus is in everything, permeating the whole cosmos. Materialist because it's grounded in physical principles like air and particles. And monism because ultimately there's only one fundamental reality, this minder Zeus.
So everything is interconnected, ordered, and ultimately divine in a physical sense.
That's the vision. A universe where everything is ultimately rational and arranged for the best by this single intelligent principle. A cosmos designed to be understood.
So, armed with this grand unified theory of mind-air Zeus, how exactly does he do it? How does he perform this interpretive alchemy? What are the actual techniques he uses to turn these wild myths into, well, Presocratic physics? Sounds like some serious heavy lifting.
It absolutely is. And his interpretive strategy, he lays it out pretty explicitly. He claims Orpheus did not intend to tell contentious riddles, but rather great things in riddles.
So Orpheus wasn't just telling stories, he was deliberately hiding deep truths.
That's the claim, that he was speaking mystically. And the author points to the opening line of the poem, supposedly, "Close the doors, you uninitiated." He uses that as proof positive that the text is an allegory, meant only for the pure in hearing.
So right away he sets up this insider-outsider dynamic. If you don't get my reading, you're just not initiated.
Exactly. It's a classic move for esoteric interpretation. He's creating a kind of hermeneutic gatekeeper.
Okay, so what are the keys to get through that gate? What tools does he use for this initiated reading?
Well, his method relies heavily on what scholars often describe as playful, sometimes even acrobatic etymology.
Etymology, like interpreting words based on their supposed origins or sounds.
Yeah, very much like the kind of thing Plato satirizes in his dialogue, the Cratylus. Twisting word origins, playing on similar sounds to extract a desired meaning. It can seem quite contrived to us now.
I can imagine. What else?
He also claims Orpheus used poetic devices, like hyperbaton, that's just transposing words in a sentence, changing the normal word order to intentionally obscure the true physical meaning from the masses.
So Orpheus scrambled his sentences on purpose to hide the physics lesson.
That's the argument. It allows him, the interpreter, to rearrange things and say, see, this is what he really meant.
Yeah.
It basically lets him transform the Orphic theogony, the story of the gods' births and successions, into a physical cosmogony, an account of the universe's creation through natural processes.
Okay, let's see it in action. Can you give some specific examples? How does he reinterpret the gods?
Sure. The whole succession myth, Uranus, Cronus, Zeus, gets systematically reinterpreted as a physical process. So Uranus, the sky god who gets overthrown.
Castrated by Cronus, right? Pretty violent myth.
Very. But in the Derveni author's reading, Uranus isn't a god. He becomes the determining mind, Originus, the intelligence that initially sets the boundaries or limits of creation.
Okay. And Cronus, the son who does the deed.
Cronus becomes the striking mind, Krunu. He's the force that causes those fundamental particles to collide and form distinct entities. So Cronus's great deed against Uranus isn't castration at all.
It's particles bumping together.
It's the physical act of setting matter into motion, initiating the whole cosmic process. The divine drama is completely drained out and replaced with physics.
That's quite a leap. Taking this incredibly graphic, symbolic story and saying it's about particle physics. What about even trickier stuff, like divine incest, Zeus and his mother Rhea, for example?
Yes. He doesn't shy away from those either. Even the scandalous incest of Zeus and Rhea gets rationalized through some, well, pretty ingenious linguistic manipulation.
How on earth does he manage that?
He argues that the word mother moger in the Orphic poem doesn't actually mean mother. It refers to mind, nous. And then he claims the possessive pronoun he's, can also mean good, ea, in epic poetic language.
Wait, so his mother becomes good mind.
Bingo. It transforms the morally shocking act of incest into Zeus uniting with the good mind, making it a purely philosophical statement about the supreme deity merging with the rational principle.
That feels extremely convenient. Talk about acrobatic etymology.
It's definitely what scholars call contorted reasoning. But through these kinds of interpretations, Agenity and the divine drama of the Orphic poem is systematically dismantled and rebuilt as a treatise on Presocratic physics. He finds or imposes a consistent rational order beneath the mythological surface, always confirming his underlying monistic materialist view.
Okay, this systematic reinterpretation, this whole project, it leads us to a really crucial question, doesn't it? One that echoes down through the centuries for pretty much any act of interpretation. What was the Derveni author's ultimate goal? His intention? Was he trying to destroy these myths, defend them, or just sort of hijack their authority for his own philosophy?
That is the million drachma question, isn't it? And it's the subject of intense scholarly debate. But exploring that debate gives us a critical framework we can apply directly to later thinkers, including Žižek. There are basically three main interpretations that stand out.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, there's what some scholars call the atheist thesis. This sees his project as an active attack.
An attack on myth and religion.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Proponents like the scholar Richard Yanko argue the author was a radical rationalist, maybe even the notorious figure Diagoras of Melos, who is actually accused of atheism in antiquity. In this view, the allegory is deeply polemical. It's designed to ridicule traditional religion, to strip away what they see as the obfuscating trappings of myth.
The fancy dress hiding the mundane reality.
Exactly, to reveal them as nothing more than primitive, flawed attempts at physics, aimed at an enlightened audience who could see through the old stories. So it's a destructive act, clearing the ground for a more scientific worldview.
So reading number one, he's debunking the myths, showing they're just bad science.
That's the gist. But then you have almost the polar opposite, the apologist thesis.
Yeah.
This frames his work as an act of defense.
Defending myth. How does that work?
Well, other scholars argue the author might have been a pious figure, maybe even an Orphic priest himself, trying to defend the tradition from precisely those rationalist critiques that were gaining ground.
Trying to save Orpheus from the scientists.
Kinda, yeah. By showing that the ancient myths are, in fact, compatible with modern physics for the 4th century BCE, obviously he restores faith for an intellectually sophisticated audience. He harmonizes religion and reason. He's saying, look, our sacred texts already contain these scientific truths. You just need the right philosophical key, my key, to unlock them.
Okay, so attack versus defense. That's a pretty stark contrast. What's the third option?
The third, and perhaps more nuanced view, is the appropriator thesis, focusing on appropriation.
Appropriation, meaning?
This suggests the main goal isn't pure attack or pure defense, but rather to appropriate Orpheus's immense cultural authority for the author's own, quite possibly novel, philosophical system.
So Orpheus becomes a mouthpiece for the author's ideas.
Exactly. Orpheus becomes a venerable mask for a new doctrine. The author's often outrageous interpretations, the ones that really stretch the linguistic or logical limits.
Like the good mind thing.
Like the good mind thing. They suggest that the author's own ideas, not faithfully interpreting Orpheus, are the main concern. This view frames him as maybe a speculative theologian, or even a heretical Orphic, someone introducing radical innovation but doing it under the guise of respecting tradition.
So he's using Orpheus's ancient street cred to sell his own philosophy.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And this unresolved debate attack, defense, appropriation, it highlights a fundamental ambiguity in the allegorical method itself. It shows how this powerful tool can be used to destroy, preserve, or co-opt authority, depending entirely on the interpreter's goals and maybe what they want you, the reader or listener, to believe about the original text. Its meaning really changes with the hand that wields it.
Okay, now let's do that time jump. Fast forward a couple of millennia from ancient Greece to a very contemporary figure, Slavoj Žižek.
Right, buckle up.
At first glance, he seems worlds away from ancient Greek papyri, doesn't he? You're more likely to find him analyzing Hollywood movies than digging through ancient tombs.
Absolutely. Culturally, contextually, totally different universes.
And yet, our sources suggest there's this striking parallel in his intellectual project. How does Žižek engage in his own very modern, radical act of interpretive appropriation?
You're right, the structural parallels are quite profound, almost uncanny, despite the vast historical and cultural gap. Like the Derveni author, Žižek systematically reinterprets culturally authoritative discourses. But for him, it's through the lens of his own complex philosophical system.
Rooted in Lacanian psychoanalysis and Hegelian dialectics, right?
Exactly. A very different toolkit from Presocratic physics. And he, too, is trying to reveal a hidden truth. And this is the crucial difference we'll keep coming back to. The nature of that truth is fundamentally different. He's not looking for a rational, unified cosmos. He's looking for something much more unsettling.
Okay, so Žižek operates in what he calls our contemporary post-ideological society, a time where maybe the old grand narratives, religion, traditional politics have faded somewhat. So what has stepped in to fill that authoritative void that myth once occupied? What are the new Orphic poems for Žižek?
That's exactly the right question. Because authoritative discourses don't just disappear, they morph. And in place of those older narratives, Žižek argues that popular culture and science have emerged as these immensely powerful authoritative forces that shape our understanding of the world, often without us even realizing it.
Okay, let's take those one by one. Popular culture first. Cinema.
Yeah, cinema is a modern mythos. Film, especially mainstream Hollywood cinema, functions very much like ancient myths did. It provides the shared narratives, the symbols, the fantasies that structure our collective life.
How so?
Well, it shapes cultural values, right? It subtly reinforces or maybe sometimes subverts social norms. For Žižek, Hollywood productions aren't just passive entertainment. They act as a kind of social mode of address. They create very ideological fabric of society by implicitly telling us what to desire, how to perceive our reality, what counts as normal or achievable.
So the stories we watch become the background radiation shaping how we think and feel.
Pretty much, yeah. They influence us often unconsciously, which makes them absolutely prime targets for Žižek's interpretive method. He wants to decode the hidden messages.
Okay, so blockbusters like The Matrix aren't just popcorn flicks. There are modern myths carrying hidden ideological freight. And the other authority, science.
Right, science as ultimate authority, especially theoretical physics, and particularly quantum mechanics. This holds a unique cultural authority today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It claims to describe the fundamental nature of reality itself.
Exactly. It offers explanations for the very fabric of existence. And its findings are often really counterintuitive, paradoxical. Even think about quantum entanglement, uncertainty, the observer effect.
Stuff that bends the mind.
Totally. And that makes it fertile ground for philosophical speculation. It lends this aura of ultimate scientific legitimacy to what are often actually quite metaphysical claims. Even if many working physicists are just focused on the math, shut up and calculate, the philosophical interpretations carry huge weight.
So for Žižek, film and physics aren't just objects of study.
No, they're the raw material. They're the sites where you can excavate the hidden logic of our contemporary condition, the places where the underlying contradictions, the void at the heart of our reality, might reveal themselves. He sees them as modern riddles that, if you interpret them correctly, reveal the nature of what he calls the real.
That's a powerful claim, finding the void in movies and physics. So what's the theoretical toolkit he uses? What are the main pillars of his system that let him diagnose ideology and reality in everything from Kung Fu Panda to quantum fields?
Yes, his range is impressive. His system is formidable, no doubt. It's a complex synthesis, but we can break it down into three main pillars he uses to articulate his understanding of ideology and the nature of reality. It's this intricate weave of ideas he applies pretty consistently.
Okay, pillar number one.
First, Lacanian psychoanalysis. This gives him the core concepts for his ontology, his theory of being and his theory of the subject. Central here is Lacan's famous triad: the imaginary, the symbolic, and crucially, the real.
Okay, let's pause there. Can you give us a quick, maybe intuitive handle on those three? Imaginary, symbolic, real.
Sure, let's try. Think of the imaginary as the realm of images and identifications. It's how we see ourselves in the world, often through mirroring, like a baby first recognizing itself in a mirror and forming a sense of a unified self, even if that unity is a bit illusory. It's about coherent images.
Okay, images and self-perception. What about the symbolic?
The symbolic is what Lacan called the big other. It's the sociolinguistic order that structures our reality language, laws, cultural norms, social expectations. It's the framework of rules and words we operate within, the network that gives meaning and order, even if it's an artificial or arbitrary one, is how we talk about and organize the world.
The structure, the rules, the language grid. Got it. And the real. That sounds like the most important one for Žižek.
It absolutely is. The real is the tricky one. It's everything that resists or is excluded from symbolization. It's that which cannot be neatly integrated into the symbolic order or captured by the imaginary. Think of it as a traumatic void, an impossible to symbolize hard kernel at the heart of existence.
A void, so it's not like objective reality.
And no, not really objective reality in the usual sense. It's more like the fundamental lack, the inconsistency, the antagonism that our symbolic order tries and always fails to completely paper over. It's the ultimate blind spot, the disruption, the trauma that proves our symbolic reality isn't seamless or complete. And that's where Žižek argues ideology kicks in as a fantasy to cover over this void.
Wow, okay. That's heavy. Imaginary images, symbolic, structure language, real, the unnameable void gap. What's the second pillar?
Second, he draws heavily on Hegelian dialectics, and this is key, he offers a really radical rereading of Hegel. He opposes the traditional view of Hegel's dialectic as this nice, neat process moving towards a progressive synthesis where contradictions get resolved into a higher, more complete truth.
Right. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, the tidy version.
Yeah, Žižek throws a wrench in that.
Yeah.
For him, Hegel's absolute knowledge isn't about reaching some grand, harmonious, final truth. Instead, it's the final, maybe painful acceptance that the concept, our whole system of understanding is inherently not all. It's incomplete.
So absolute knowledge is knowing that we can't know everything perfectly.
Kind of. It's recognizing the failure of all attempts at perfect synthesis. It's seeing the gap, the inconsistency, as fundamental, not something to be overcome. He reinterprets Hegel's famous negation of the negation not as returning to a higher positive state, but as realizing that the wound is already in itself its own healing.
Meaning
The problem, the inconsistency, the negativity itself is constitutive. It's the engine of reality, not a flaw to be fixed. It's about shifting perspective to see the lack as the core. This is crucial for his idea of the real as this fundamental void.
That's a fascinating, almost counterintuitive take on Hegel, using dialectics to find the cracks, not build the perfect wall.
Exactly. He's always looking for the inconsistency that reveals the underlying real. And this leads to the third pillar, a Marxist critique of ideology, but updated for our supposedly cynical times.
How does he update Marx? Isn't ideology just false consciousness for Marx? Believing lies that support the ruling class?
That's the classic view, yeah. But Žižek argues that in our post-ideological society, we're often much more cynical. We know things are bad, we know about inequality, climate change, whatever. It's not that we don't know the truth.
So ideology isn't just ignorance.
No. For Žižek, ideology today is more like an unconscious fantasy that structures our social reality anyway. It allows us to endure the inherent contradictions, to keep functioning despite knowing the uncomfortable truth. His famous formula flips Marx. It's not they do not know it, but they are doing it, but rather they know very well what they are doing, but still they are doing it.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about recycling. Many of us know, cynically, that individual recycling might have minimal impact compared to industrial pollution. We know the system is flawed, but we still diligently sort our plastics because participating in the ritual, the fantasy that we're doing our part, allows us to continue participating in the very consumer society that causes the problem. The fantasy makes reality bearable.
So ideology is the story we tell ourselves to keep going, even when we know better.
Precisely. It's the fantasy that sutures over the gap, the void, the real of the situation.
Okay, armed with this Lacan-Hegel-Marx toolkit, Žižek famously dives into popular culture. And The Matrix is probably his most well-known example, right? How does he use that film as a kind of Rorschach test for contemporary ideology? What does it reveal?
He absolutely loves The Matrix. He sees it not just as a film, but as this perfect vehicle to illustrate his core theoretical claims. It's like a modern myth that externalizes his whole philosophy.
So what's his main take?
Well, first, for Žižek, The Matrix itself is a perfect representation of the Lacanian big other, the symbolic order.
The invisible structure.
Exactly. The film's virtual world is this externalized version of the virtual symbolic network that structures our reality and, in a way, alienates us. It's the system, the unseen framework pulling the strings, where the subject is spoken by the structure rather than speaking freely. Our identities, desires, perceptions are shaped by this all-encompassing symbolic order, just like the characters plugged into the Matrix.
So the Matrix computer program is just a metaphor for language, culture, law, the stuff that shapes us.
That's a big part of it, yeah. Then think about the famous choice Morpheus offers Neo. The red pill or the blue pill.
Choose reality or illusion.
Right, but Žižek gives it a twist. He argues it's not, like in Plato's cave allegory, a simple choice between a false illusion and some pleasant, enlightened, true reality. Instead, it's a choice between the symbolic fiction of the Matrix, which, however illusory, is still a coherent, livable world, and the traumatic, desolate desert of the real.
The desert of the real.
Yeah. This perfectly illustrates the Lacanian real, for him, not as a higher, more authentic truth that brings liberation, but as a horrifying void, a raw, unstructured, unbearable truth. The actual reality, once you unplug, is depicted as destroyed, desolate, right? That's the real. It's not pretty.
That is a much darker take. Usually, the red pill metaphor is about embracing uncomfortable truths, but still truths. Žižek seems to be saying the real is just awful. But he goes even further, doesn't he? He critiques the film's own idea of reality.
He does, and this is where his analysis gets really sharp, really Žižekian. His most radical move is his critique of the film's supposed real world. He argues that Zion, the underground city where the free humans live.
The resistance fighters.
Right. He argues that Zion itself is just another layer of ideology. It's another fantasy fantasy, another narrative constructed to sustain the subjects in their struggle, allowing them to believe they are truly free and fighting a meaningful battle against the machines.
So even the real world in the movie is fake or ideological.
It serves an ideological function, yeah. It gives them purpose, identity, community, all things the symbolic order provides. So he famously says he desires a third pill.
A third pill. What would that do?
It wouldn't just show him the desert of the real outside the matrix. It would allow him to see the real within the illusion of the matrix itself, to recognize how the fundamental fantasy structures that reality.
What fantasy is that?
Well, the underlying horror in the matrix, right, is that humans exist essentially as batteries, providing energy, or, in Lacanian terms, jouissance, enjoyment for the other, the matrix machines. Žižek argues this horrifying fantasy isn't just hidden by the matrix simulation, it's the hidden truth that unconsciously sustains our conscious reality. The ideological mask doesn't just hide the real state of things. The distortion, the fundamental horror, the void, is baked into the very essence of the real.
Wow, so the ultimate horror isn't that reality is fake, but that the underlying truth is this obscene fantasy of being used for the other's enjoyment.
That's his provocative reading. The fantasy isn't just covering the void. The void is the obscene fantasy.
Okay, beyond pop culture, Žižek also wades into the deep waters of theoretical physics, especially quantum mechanics, to find support for his philosophy. How does he make direct ontological claims about the actual nature of reality using these scientific findings? He's not just using physics as a metaphor here, is he?
No, it's definitely more than just metaphor for him. He deploys concepts from quantum physics to argue that they provide actual empirical support for his Lacanian Hegelian worldview. He sees specific scientific findings as revealing the fundamentally non-all, incomplete nature of reality itself.
Okay, how does that work? What's the connection?
Well, take quantum indeterminacy and the incomplete real. Žižek argues that the inherent uncertainty in quantum mechanics, the fact that particles don't seem to have definite properties like position or momentum until they're measured.
Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, that sort of thing.
Right. He contends this implies that reality is in itself blurred, muddled, that the limits of our knowledge aren't just about our measurement tools being clunky, they're grounded in the incompleteness of reality itself.
So the fuzziness isn't just in our perception, it's in the things themselves.
That's his claim. It directly supports his core Lacanian Hegelian idea that reality is non-all, that it's constituted by a fundamental lack or antagonism, rather than being some perfectly coherent, self-contained whole. The universe itself, at its quantum core, is fuzzy, inconsistent, incomplete.
Okay, that's a big ontological leap from the physics. What else?
He also connects the observer effect and retroactivity. You know, the idea in some interpretations of quantum mechanics that the act of measurement seems to retroactively determine the state of a particle, like the particle's past, wasn't fixed until the present observation.
Yeah, that's a really weird one. Schrodinger's cat kind of plays on that.
Exactly. Žižek links this directly to the Lacanian concept of retroactivity, where a present act or interpretation constitutes the meaning of the past. The past isn't just a fixed chain of events, its significance is shaped by the present. He sees things like top-down cosmology, where present observations might help determine the universe's history as providing a physical basis for this philosophical concept.
So the present shaping the past isn't just a psychological thing, it might be how the universe works.
That's the parallel he draws.
Yeah.
And finally, there's the idea of self-interaction and Hegelian speculation. The quantum mechanical notion that a particle can, in a sense, interact with itself, maybe by taking all possible paths simultaneously in a Feynman diagram.
Right, influencing its own trajectory.
Yeah. For Žižek, this is a direct echo of Hegelian speculative thought, where what seems like an interaction between two separate external things is revealed, at a deeper level, to be the interaction of one element with itself, reflecting an internal division or negativity. It's very abstract, suggesting the universe is constantly differentiating itself from within.
Okay, those are some dense connections he's making. But there are criticisms here, right? That he's maybe misusing or overinterpreting the science.
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial to acknowledge those. Žižek is often accused quite strongly by some physicists and philosophers of science of latching on to highly speculative or purely philosophical interpretations of quantum mechanics.
Interpretations that aren't universally accepted by physicists themselves.
Right, or ignoring the fact that many physicists just focus on the predictive power of the equations, doing the calculations, without making these huge ontological claims about reality being blurred or incomplete. Critics argue his use of science can seem like a selective appropriation, cherry-picking concepts that happen to fit his pre-existing philosophical framework, rather than a rigorous engagement with the science on its own terms.
So the charge is he's using the authority of science to bolster his philosophy rather than letting the science lead.
That's the essence of the critique.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it genuine dialogue, or is it philosophical ventriloquism using science as the dummy?
Okay, so let's bring it back together. We have the Derveni author using allegory on ancient myth to find or impose a unified rational order. And then we have Žižek, millennia later, using psychoanalysis and dialectics on modern pop culture and science to uncover a fundamental void, a gap, and inconsistency.
Two incredibly different endpoints, right?
Yeah.
Order versus void.
Totally. But the striking parallels in their interpretive strategies, despite the time gap and the different materials, allow for this really unique comparative critique. What can this ancient allegorist, this nameless figure from the 4th century BCE, actually teach us about a provocative contemporary theorist like Žižek, and about how we interpret our world generally?
This is where the comparison really pays off, I think. By putting them side by side, we can use the ancient allegorist almost as a lens to analyze the modern theorist. It reveals not just these common patterns of argument, but also that profound metaphysical divergence, order versus void, that lies right at the heart of their projects. It's like having a 2,400-year-old control group for a philosophical experiment. It helps isolate what's specific to the method versus what's specific to the interpreter's own core beliefs.
Okay, let's really nail down these structural similarities. What's the common blueprint, the playbook, that both the Derveni author and Žižek seem to follow, consciously or not?
The similarities are systematic, they're deep. It's almost uncanny, like they downloaded the same how to philosophically reinterpret authority software package across the centuries.
Haha, okay, step one.
Step 1. Identify authority. Both begin by identifying a culturally authoritative discourse, something that carries weight, that people see as holding some kind of truth or deep meaning.
So for Derveni, the sacred, esoteric, Orphic theogony.
Right. And for Žižek, the secular but ubiquitous popular film and the discourse of ultimate rationality, quantum physics, both target sources seen, in their respective times, as repositories of fundamental truths about the cosmos or society.
Okay, identify the authority, step 2.
Step 2. Reinterpret via external system. They then proceed to reinterpret these authoritative discourses through an external philosophical system that they bring to the table.
So Derveni uses his mix of Presocratic natural philosophy, Anaxagoras, atomism, Heraclitus.
Exactly. And Žižek used his Lacanian psychoanalysis combined with Hegelian dialectics. It's never just about the text or phenomenon in isolation. It's about how their chosen philosophical framework unlocks and often completely reframes it.
Step 3. Claim hidden truth.
You got it. Claim hidden truth. Both claim to reveal a hidden, true meaning that's inaccessible to a naive, literal reading. Derveni says Orpheus spoke in riddles for the pure in hearing. Žižek aims to uncover the hidden, unconscious ideological fantasy structuring the text or phenomenon, something most people miss. They both position themselves as decoders, revealing the real message beneath the surface.
And the step 4 seems to be about positioning themselves.
Yeah, critique an elite audience. This whole interpretive process usually serves to critique predecessors or rivals. Derveni takes shots at literalist priests and other sophists. Žižek constantly polemicizes against post-structuralist liberals, you name it.
Right, he's famously combative.
Very. And both address a kind of intellectual elite, the pure in hearing for Derveni, the theoretically savvy students of theory for Žižek. This whole strategy allows them to ultimately ground their own metaphysical claims in the borrowed authority of their chosen text or phenomenon.
So the interpretation validates the source, but mostly the source validates the interpreter's system.
That's the dynamic. And look at their specific goals and methods side by side. Derveni's stated goal is finding the true meaning intended by Orpheus, allegedly, using allegory and etymology. His ultimate claim: chaotic myth hides a single, rational, unified physical reality. User. He finds order.
Okay. And Žižek?
Žižek's stated goal is revealing the hidden unconscious ideological fantasy structuring the text reality, using psychoanalysis and dialectical reversal. His ultimate claim: coherent ideology hides a fundamental inconsistency, antagonism, or void, the real. He finds disorder, or rather, the constitutive void.
Wow. So the mechanisms identify authority, reinterpret externally, claim hidden truth, critique rivals are almost identical.
Structurally, yes. Even though the content, the tools, and especially the final conclusion about the nature of reality are wildly different. It's a recurring intellectual strategy. Hashtag 3.2, the Derveni author, as a model for critique of Žižek.
This is a really powerful point, because the ancient Derveni case gives us this historical benchmark, doesn't it? It suggests that maybe some of the criticisms often leveled at Žižek about his interpretations being forced or appropriative aren't just unique features of postmodern thought. Maybe there are inherent dangers in this whole mode of interpretive appropriation whenever it occurs.
Exactly. The critiques lobbed at the Derveni author way back then find direct, almost verbatim echoes in modern discussions of Žižek. It shows these aren't new problems. They're recurring challenges tied to this specific interpretive strategy.
Like what? What are the recurring criticisms?
Well, first, there's the charge of preposterous interpretation. Just like critics accuse the Derveni author of unscrupulous and uniformly false interpretations that deliberately avoid the obvious meaning.
Like turning castration into particle physics.
Right. Žižek gets hit with the same charge all the time, that he violently forces films, books, political events, scientific theories into his pre-existing Lacanian Hegelian framework. Detractors see his readings as distorting, simplifying, creating these off-the-wall syntheses rather than careful, close analyses. The feeling is often that the interpretation says more about Žižek than about the thing being interpreted.
Okay. Preposterous readings. What else echoes?
The charge of appropriation. That debate about whether the Derveni author was faithfully interpreting Orpheus or just using him as a pretext.
Using Orpheus as a mask.
Yeah, that finds a direct parallel in critiques of Žižek. Is he really interpreting Hitchcock or The Matrix on their own terms? Or is he simply using their massive cultural capital, their coolness factor, as convenient and entertaining vehicles to illustrate and legitimize his own philosophical system? In both cases, the suspicion rises that the authority of the object being studied is secondary to promoting the interpreter's own doctrine.
The text becomes a convenient hook to hang his theory on.
That's the accusation. Then there's the agonistic stance, the combativeness.
Ah, yes, the intellectual fighting.
The Derveni author polemicized against naive literalists and priests. Žižek is famous for his relentless polemical positioning against other contemporary thinkers. Derrida, Deleuze, Butler, Habermas. The list goes on. For both, interpretation isn't just about explaining, it's an act of intellectual combat. It seems designed not just to clarify, but to vanquish rival systems and prove the absolute superiority of their own. It often feels like a zero-sum game.
And finally, the difficulty, the style. Žižek is notoriously challenging to read.
And guess what? The Derveni text is famously described by scholars as the hardest to understand, full of contorted reasoning.
Yeah.
Similarly, Žižek's style gets slammed as chaotic, repetitive, non-systematic, deliberately obscure.
Chomsky famously criticized him for using fancy terms without substance.
Right. Employing this dizzying array of jargon and polysyllables that, for critics, masks a lack of genuine theoretical rigor or clarity. So both thinkers, separated by millennia, face accusations of being unnecessarily difficult, perhaps even using obscurity as a shield or a marker of profundity.
So we have these incredible methodological parallels, these shared strategies, even shared criticisms across 2,400 years. But despite all that similarity in how they interpret, there's this crucial point where their philosophical projects just completely diverge. They end up in totally opposite places metaphysically.
This is the absolute core finding, the central inversion that this whole comparison illuminates. Despite using structurally similar interpretive tools, their ultimate metaphysical commitments, their fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality, are diametrically opposed.
Okay, spell it out. Derveni first.
The Derveni author's allegorical method is fundamentally an act of reduction and stabilization. He starts with a messy, violent, contradictory, anthropomorphic world of Orphic myth castration, incest, gods fighting gods. It seems chaotic.
Right, the raw material looks like disorder.
Exactly. But through his interpretation, he demonstrates, or claims to demonstrate, that behind this chaotic surface lies a unified, coherent, rational physical system governed by the singular principle of nous ergus. His goal is to resolve all the contradictions into a stable, underlying, positive truth. For the Derveni author, the world, at its core, is fundamentally one. It's an ordered cosmos, a harmonious system that his philosophy unveils. He seeks to fill the apparent chaos with the meaning of a rational order.
Okay, so he starts with chaos, ends with order. He provides cosmic reassurance.
You could put it that way, yes. Now, flip to Žižek. Slavoj Žižek's exegetical method, by contrast, is fundamentally an act of destabilization. He starts with the seemingly coherent, ideologically saturated narratives of popular culture, or the apparent solidity of scientific explanations, things that look orderly on the surface.
Right, like a Hollywood movie plot or a scientific law.
Precisely. But he demonstrates that these seemingly coherent structures are necessarily built around and structured by a fundamental antagonism, a traumatic void, a gap, what he calls the real. His goal is to show that the perceived order of the symbolic is merely a fantasy concealing an irresolvable constitutive contradiction. For Žižek, reality is fundamentally split, inconsistent, and not all. There is no underlying harmony. There's only this fundamental lack or void that gives structure to everything precisely because it can't be integrated. He seeks to reveal the meaningless real at the core of seeming meaningfulness.
So he starts with apparent order, ends with a void. He offers cosmic disturbance.
That's a good way to think about it. And herein lies the crucial inversion. The Derveni author deploys his interpretive apparatus to prove reality is fundamentally order. Žižek deploys a structurally identical apparatus to prove reality is fundamentally void. It shows that the interpretive method itself, this appropriation of authority to reveal a hidden truth, is, in a sense, a neutral tool. Its philosophical outcome depends entirely on the a priori metaphysical commitments, the fundamental worldview of the interpreter before they even start. The Derveni author provides this perfect historical control case that illuminates this dynamic with startling clarity. He used the same strategy to get the exact opposite result. Hashtag tag outro.
What an incredible journey that was, seriously. From literally the earliest surviving book in Europe.
A charred papyrus from an ancient Greek tomb.
To arguably the most provocative, maybe notorious, contemporary philosopher. Shock.
It's quite the arc.
It really shows how these fundamental philosophical questions about truth, about reality, about how we interpret the world and the stories we tell ourselves just persist across millennia, doesn't it? They get dressed up in different cultural clothes, use different texts, but they wrestle with similar underlying problems.
Indeed. And the Derveni Papyrus, seen this way, offers more than just a curious historical parallel to Žižek. It provides this 2,400-year-old precedent for a very specific and powerful type of philosophical argumentation.
Which is?
The appropriation of a culturally authoritative discourse, myth, film, science, whatever, carries weight in order to ground a preconceived metaphysical system. Žižek's project, seen through this lens, isn't some uniquely postmodern phenomenon. It's a contemporary iteration of an ancient intellectual strategy.
And the critiques of his method, that it's forced, appropriative, polemical, obscure.
They're not new either. They're basically the same critiques that can be leveled against his Presocratic predecessor. It proves some intellectual battles, or maybe intellectual temptations, are timeless.
So the ultimate critique here, the one illuminated by comparing Derveni and Žižek, isn't simply that Žižek misreads his sources sometimes, or that his style is difficult, or even that he's maybe too selective with his science.
No. The deeper point illuminated by the comparison is that his entire massive, complex exegetical apparatus, deployed across everything from Hollywood blockbusters to quantum physics, seems consistently mobilized in service of one single, unwavering metaphysical claim.
The ontological primacy of the void, the idea that, at its core, reality is structured by a lack and inconsistency.
Precisely. And the Derveni author, by using fundamentally the same tools to argue for the exact opposite, the ontological primacy of an ordering principle, of nous exposes the degree to which the conclusion might already be decided before the interpretation even begins.
The interpretation confirms the pre-existing belief about reality.
It certainly looks that way when you compare them. The ancient allegorist sought to fill the world with the meaning of a rational cosmos. The contemporary theorist seeks to reveal the meaningless real at its core. The profound parallel in their methods makes their ultimate divergence in purpose all the more stark and, I think, really illuminating about the relationship between interpretation and belief.
So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening right now? As you navigate this world absolutely brimming with interpretations, competing narratives, claims of hidden truths, whether they come from scientists, politicians, artists, advertisers, even friends.
Or AI podcasts.
Ha, indeed. Consider this. How often do we, maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, use the existing narratives around us, scientific findings, cultural trends, personal experiences, the news we consume, not necessarily to discover truth, but to confirm a conclusion we've already reached about the fundamental nature of reality?
Are you, in your own interpretations, ultimately seeking evidence of an underlying order, a coherent meaning?
Or are you drawn to finding the gaps, the inconsistencies, the void beneath the surface? And maybe, just maybe, what does that choice, that interpretive inclination say about you? Something to ponder.